to reduce interest rates, that we might continue or limp along at that in that state of handicap or jeopardization some while further. And they replied back, well, we can't reduce interest rates. We have to maintain interest rates to eradicate price inflation. I said, well, you know, I've already provided you proof that interest does not solve price inflation. It's the cause of price inflation, and by maintaining elevated rates of interest, you're preventing industry from increasing its prices by depriving the market of that much money, by, instead of paying it out in increasing prices, paying it out in interest rates to these banks who don't even deserve this. You know, I said, you have to reduce interest rates, and you're going to have to tell me how much, and we don't know. You know, and I'm thinking, what a bunch of, excuse my language, what a bunch of stupid fuckers, you know. I mean, talk about inept, you know. So I explained to them that as we reach the brink of failure at the higher rates of interest, we would have to de-escalate the rates of interest at an ever-increasing rate, in fact, excuse me, so that we could persist some while longer and extend the lifespan to the greatest degree extent that it might possibly reach. And so they said, in the end, they decided that I knew what I was doing. I offered that what I would do was I would develop some logic as we reached the brink of failure, as we would feel the pain in real life, it would respond to that and decrease the interest rate so much. And then as under those decreased rates, we approach the brink of failure again, it would decrease them again and decrease them again. So this logic then ended up predicting the necessary and inevitable reductions of interest rates across this whole period of time as well. So in the end, what happens is, I run literally hundreds and hundreds, if not thousands, of scenarios, and decide by careful examination of all of them what de-escalation of interest and escalation of the circulation is most plausible, being as these people are as they are. And out of all of them, which I supplied all of the data to the Reagan administration, like in 1984, I picked the most plausible, of all of the patterns, given as things are. And those models then, in 1983, with 1983 numbers, projected, it's just uncanny how they show how interest rates had to be reduced and were reduced, and it's uncanny how they show exactly how the pattern of debt increased, and how, in a less conclusive way, they likewise projected, I actually predicted that Reagan was going to triple the national debt if he finished his second term, and it's exactly all of it would happen. Exactly all of it would happen. So the models projected, from 83 numbers, that this lie of economy would fail, likely globally, at approximately 2010 AD, and that pattern which I selected was just a wee bit conservative in order that it be credible as credible could be. And we're actually slightly ahead of the curve, and they've engaged in the methods of artificial sustention, which I also provided to them to elaborate on a fact that each of those things had a finite limitation as well. So you can't sustain this thing forever, and at best you can only keep it in a stage of marginal survival for some while longer. at the same time, all the while, in all of these methods, you're accumulating further debt, further ensuring an even more rapid, immediate, total failure once the house of cards falls. We haven't even been held accountable to sustain, this further multiplication of indebtedness by all the methods of artificial sustention. Federal taxes that haven't increased proportionately, and they can increase. There isn't enough room for them to increase at all. Much less proportionally. It would instantly engender terminal failure if they thought to do so. So that further tells you what all this these preposterous assertions that we have to return to austerity. That austerity would immediately collapse the entire world economy. What's more, it's not even possible. What's more and worse yet is there's no justification that we pay this multiplication of artificial indebtedness. The only right thing to do is to count all prior payments of interest instead toward principal. We would have no foreclosure. We still have 10,000 homes a day going into foreclosure in the United States. We would have no foreclosure. Not only would we have no foreclosure, but by counting all prior payments of interest instead toward principal, practically all of the world's debt would simply vanish because we've already paid it many times over. Each time we pay for a $100,000 house, the $100,000 in principal and $300,000 or $400,000 in interest, we paid for 4 or 5 houses. You see, halfway through it, we paid for 2.5. 1/5 of the way through a 20 or 30 year mortgage, we've paid for the house, and all the while because we're paying for it at a far over a far lesser time span than its whole lifespan, and at a far greater rate. Every one of the remaining debts would be years, many years ahead of its schedule of payment under mathematically perfected economy. Moreover, is in general, our situation would be reflected as this. We might pay $1,000 a month for that $100,000 home with a 100-year lifespan now under usury. Under mathematically perfected economy, we would pay $1,000 a year, 1/12 as much. Well, that means that even if we took half of our income, saved it for maintaining the same standard of living through half an adult life span of retirement, that we would still have, as we have immediately just by adopting mathematically perfected economy, we would have 12 times the spendable income without any further improvement in prosperity at all. And of course, because we can finance all our wealth at no extrinsic expense, and are only committed to paying for these costs of financing at the rate of consumption or depreciation, we would immediately, we'd have huge improvements in prosperity, new industry, restoration of expatriated industry, and all this. So this is to understate the case, but immediately we have 12 times the spendable income by adopting mathematically perfected economy, which is just an accounting issue, which could be, we could be writing the software today and be prepared to do it in one day, someday when we ourselves decide to do this, because government is not going to do it for us. There's no greater resistance than in political circles, and because they know they're wrong already, their only strategy is evasion. So we know how weak they actually are if a people educated themselves and therefore united on a fact of singular solution. Now, you seem to be sucked in, for the while at least, of this idea of money is debt. But as I was just saying, just for adopting mathematically perfected economy, pretty much across the board, we have 12 times the spendable income, or our income goes 12 times as far. We immediately would, eliminate unemployment, further industry and prosperity. It would go through, it would reach levels it never ever has in history, because it never could. Whatever industrial advancements we engineered and executed were stolen from us by the financial system, by multiplying artificial indebtedness. So even if we dedicated half of this, as I was saying, to sustaining the same lifespan so we could actually work half of our lives, our own savings, the value of it would be preserved forever by this singular formula for doing so. And so we would have, in restoring broken social programs, without even costing ourselves a cent, we would have 6 times the spendable income, which is, you know, if you think about it, that's a very, very serious immediate improvement, just to change accounting by eliminating the crimes against us which are perpetrated by the banking system. So now, you've seemed to be convinced of this idea that money can't be a debt. But in the same interview that you have with Bill Stills, you seem to sort of forecast that somehow banking would exist as a new thing. It would become, as you put it, more or less a marketplace for, you know, financiers and debtors to come together. Well, how is money not going to be a debt then? I could ask you, and I'm not going to embarrass you with a question. How would, what you're saying, if they're going to loan these people money, is that money would be a debt. Even though somehow you describe various possible ways that the money might be created, ultimately it's loaned out. You're also saying that it's legitimate for these people to charge interest, which then related to a circulation is going to multiply indebtedness. So this isn't going to work, and we already understand that from what we've said so far. But a question exists, and I note that you've gone to hundreds of colleges and presented on this, but at the same time you haven't been committed to a given path of whatever any of us might consider to be monetary reform, and seemingly a thing that which you seem to be, at least so far, committed to, is that money can't be a debt. So on the one hand, I'm saying that some of the things you say that actually inevitably manifest in money being a debt and subject to interest, if we have banks turning into this marketplace where, you know, financial people who are being educated in the banking systems today, who don't understand those systems, you know, don't understand what a solution is, if they're allowed to comprise this new marketplace, which ostensibly brings in investors and money in which is loaned to enterprise, we would have the same consequences if the money is a debt subject to interest. But what point I want to make in regard to all this is that, well, there's 2 points. What is the history of this idea that money can't be a debt? And the other thing is, what is the damages of money as a debt? These people who advocate that money can't be a debt, none of them have a proof that money cannot be a debt. And worse, I grant you that I've been arguing with these people for many years. And the idea doesn't get any popular inertia at all until at least approximately 96, 95, 97, right in there, 1997, 6, 5, in there. And there's a reason why. And I've been following this very carefully. I've been in the middle of it for all these years. And I know exactly when this idea of that money can't be a debt actually